So you've decided to become a cult leader. Congratulations! By enrolling in this Cult Organization Network Correspondence Training Program, you've taken your first step towards an exciting career in destructive cult management. But before you can begin seeking out and manipulating your first batch of vulnerable acolytes, you'll have to learn the basics. Hello and welcome. I'm Professor Johnson, and I'm obligated by court order to inform you that I'm not actually a professor. In today's lesson, we'll be examining one of the most important tools which you'll be using daily from the moment you start your first cult. This rhetorical tool has been used by cults for thousands of years. You've probably seen it in use in your daily life. Have you ever asked a question which you thought was important, only to be shut down with an expression such as, "The Lord works in mysterious ways. God has a plan. Everything happens for a reason. That's just the way it is." These are all thought-terminating cliches. In today's lesson, you'll learn about the function of a thought-terminating cliche, how famous cult leaders have used them, and how you can use them in building a cult of your own. Pay close attention to helpful hints we provided in the corner of your screen. Are you ready to learn? Then let's begin. Running a cult is never easy. Cults are filled with desperate people who are looking for answers. Unfortunately, this means your cult members are going to ask a lot of pesky questions. As a cult leader, you'll need to be able to shut down questions and discussions which might lead cult followers to question your infallibility. Fortunately, there's an easy way to shut down inconvenient questions while maintaining your status as the irrefutable origin of truth: the thought-terminating cliche. Thought-terminating cliches have been used for thousands of years to do precisely what the name says: stop bothersome thoughts in their tracks so that you can get back to the important business of manipulating your desperate and lonely followers into blindly doing as you command. The term thought-terminating cliche was coined in the 1960s by Dr. J. Lifton. According to Dr. Lifton, thought-terminating cliches compress the most far-reaching and complex of human problems into brief, highly reductive, definitive-sounding phrases, easily memorized and easily expressed. In other words, a thought-terminating cliche is a slogan or catchphrase that can be used in practically any situation to signal to your followers that this is a no-no topic, and giving it any serious consideration will result in condemnation, shunning, and retribution. In addition to being a rhetorical tool, thought-terminating cliches also have a social function. Over time, cult members can be conditioned to repeat and implement thought-terminating cliches as a form of self-policing.
We cannot shirk our responsibility as the leader of the free world because we're the only one that can do it. And therefore, the burden of maintaining the peace falls on us. And to maintain that peace requires strength.
Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength.
The Department of Defense under Donald Trump will achieve peace through strength.
And thought-terminating cliches can also be used as a social signal that this topic is off limits for consideration or discussion.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years.
This administration has done more than any, and it just shows how this is truly a manufactured hoax by the Democrat Party. For now they're talking about it all of a sudden because President Trump is in the Oval Office, but when Joe Biden was sitting in there, the Democrats never brought this up.
To make the most of thought-terminating cliches, you'll want to utilize both the rhetorical and social aspects in the development of your cult. Now, let's see how some of the great cult leaders in history have used thought-terminating cliches in theory and practice. Example 1. Charles Manson. As a charismatic leader, Charles Manson masterfully implemented both ranting and raving in coercing and controlling his cult, the Manson family. Whenever a family member would point out a contradiction in his words, Manson would recite far-out, thought-terminating cliches like "no sense makes sense" or "talk less, listen more." While such slogans are indeed nonsensical, Manson had conditioned his young and impressionable followers to hear these thought-terminating cliches as profound truths. Long after his tenure as a cult leader had ended, Manson continued to employ thought-terminating cliches to shut down uncomfortable questions during his many jailhouse interviews with prestigious journalists like Tom Snyder, Penny Daniels, and Diane Sawyer.
You're so white and pure?
Judge didn't say you were innocent.
Are you innocent?
Innocent of what?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
None of us are innocent.
Yeah, just because you're convicted in a courtroom doesn't mean you're guilty of something.
One such cliche, which Manson used frequently to shut down questions about the harm he'd caused, was to compare himself to a mirror, which simply reflected whoever was examining him.
I'm the man in the mirror, guy.
I know, man.
You know, if you like me, I like you. You don't like me, I don't like you. You swing at me, I'll swing back. You dig? You cut at me, I'll cut you. The guys you're trying to make me into is impossible. What you're doing is you're creating a legend, you're creating a beast, you're creating whatever you are judging yourselves with.
He would similarly shut down questions about the pain he'd inflicted on his followers and victims with thought-terminating cliches about the pain which he himself had suffered, resulting from the unfortunate fact that we live in a society.
From your words, as Mr. Emmons quotes them in this book, it's clear that you were guilty of murder, and yet he says in all his conversations with you, he never heard you express remorse. Have you never felt it?
Remorse for what? You people have done everything in the world to me. Doesn't that give me equal right? I can do anything I want to you people at any time I want to, because that's what you've done to me.
Example 2. L. Ron Hubbard. Scientology employs various thought-terminating cliches to help followers avoid asking questions that might lead to doubt and dissatisfaction with the answers the church provides to questions about life, the universe, and everything.
In order to progress within your church, it costs money, right? If I'm poor, how far can I progress?
Pretty far.
How far?
Well, I'll tell you this, by the time you start getting anywhere near the top, I guarantee you wouldn't be poor anymore, because generally people in Scientology do better if they honestly make it.
But let us assume there are some folks out there who are just poor. They don't have any money, they don't have any friends or relatives who have money. Is this the right religion for them?
Oh, absolutely. This is the right religion for anybody. In Scientology, you're dealing with yourself. You see, here, we have this in common with all religions of Earth. All religions of Earth try to help man to be better and to cause him spiritual improvement. Now, most in the Judeo-Christian society, they say if you have faith and you live your life, that you'll achieve spiritual salvation in the afterlife. We believe in spiritual salvation, but in the here and now.
Oh, I think,
and that's what we deal with. What's different in Scientology is how we approach it. There are higher levels of awareness as a spiritual being, and that's what we're dealing with in Scientology. Now, for me to talk to you about this and for you to have a reality on it, I don't think I'm going to get that, and I'll tell you why. You don't have a reality on it. You see, Scientology is a very personal thing. You ask why somebody would do it. I'm not making the claims for the church, Ted. Millions of Scientologists around the world are making that claim. You ask them, they are happier, they do feel they're more able, they do better in life, they know it has helped them. They say it. You can't take that away, and just like I wouldn't take that away from any other religion, when somebody then comes about and says that Scientology doesn't do that, are they telling me I don't have my own feelings?
No, I'm just asking you, and it strikes me as a reasonable question, but if you can't answer it, you can't answer it, that there must be a way of explaining, without going into any of the innermost secrets of the Church of Scientology, and I understand your church has some secrets. There has to be a way of explaining what it is you do that's different.
What it is that we do, that's not very difficult at all. We approach it on a one-on-one basis. There is absolutely a technology of Scientology. There's a philosophy which covers the subject of life. I started talking about communication earlier on. Well, of course, it covers interpersonal relationships, a million subjects. I don't have enough time all night to go into them. But separately, there is a technology that's applied to you as an individual. Actual one-on-one counseling, where you look. Well, number one, you have to understand the first premise. You are a spiritual being. You look, you find out more about yourself, who you are, where you have been. A man who can look back and do that is a very courageous individual. A lot of that includes looking back on your own past and areas where you went astray. That's similar to other religions.
Many of these semantic stop signs were first introduced by Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard and can be found in interviews and lectures which he provided in his lifetime. One of Hubbard's most frequently employed thought-terminating rhetorical maneuvers was to compare something to psychology. According to Hubbard, psychologists are nefarious enemies of humanity.
This sounds, Mr. Hubbard, in a sense, like an extension of psychology or psychiatry.
Psychology is 1879, Wundt decided that men were all animals. As Professor Wundt, Leipzig, Germany, and rather typically a Germanic concept that man is just an animal. He's a sort of a machine, and you adjust the nuts and bolts, and he runs well. After all, psychology long since stated that their own term, psycheology, meant nothing. And they say in their textbooks they don't know what a psyche is. And of course, psyche is Greek for spirit. So theoretically, they have preempted the name, the study of the spirit. But they do not study the spirit. They regard man as an animal.
Psychiatry, psychology, that comes from the word psyche. Psyche means soul. These people have preempted the field of religion, not just Scientology, every other religion. They right now practice and preach the fact that man is an animal. And I guess that is where, philosophically, we're at odds with them.
Anything psychologists do would be considered inherently evil, and conversely, anything that Hubbard compares to psychology is also inherently evil. If a Scientologist in a leadership position wants to shut down a line of thought, all he has to do is summon the thought-terminating boogeyman of psychology.
Man has believed in life everlasting much longer than he has believed in being an animal. He's only believed that he was an animal, really, since he saw the first psychologist. I probably didn't state that very flatteringly with regard to psychology.
Another thought-terminating cliche which Hubbard developed was that of the suppressive person. If the Church of Scientology wants to dismiss the words or ideas of a critic, all they have to do is label that person a suppressive person. Once a critic is designated as a suppressive person, Scientologists are expected to ignore or attack anything they say or do. The threat of being labeled a suppressive person is also used to shut down questions and thoughts which might be unfavorable to the Church of Scientology.
Do they try to take things out against you? If you leave the church or you speak out against, what do they try to do? Do they try to suppress you?
They have a policy called fair game that they claim has been canceled. And they, in fact, did issue another policy that says fair game has been canceled. However, there's another policy that says, however, dealing with suppressive people remains the same. Dealing with suppressive people means to go after them, try to destroy their lives, try to find any crimes they've committed, expose them hard. You can lie about them. They have Scientologists picketing in front of people's houses going, don't trust your neighbor, implying that he's a sexual deviant. They go after your jobs. And when that doesn't work, they go after your family.
By developing some of the most innovative and effective thought-terminating cliches of all time, L. Ron Hubbard ensured that generations of Scientologists would trudge forth, cowed into submission, toiling away their lives and expending their fortunes in service to the cult. Inspiring. Example 3. Republicans. The Republican Party is a political cult dedicated to transforming the United States of America from a nation that is almost entirely controlled by wealthy billionaires into a nation that is entirely controlled by wealthy billionaires. The current cult leader of the Republican Party is a malevolent reality TV star named Donald Trump. But the grand old party's use of thought-terminating cliches stretches back well over a century. One of the most effective think-sinking turns of phrase devised by Republicans in the 20th century was politically correct. The term politically correct had been in use to refer to orthodox ideological positions of various political factions for many decades, but it wasn't until the 1980s that Republicans under the cult leadership of a malevolent non-reality TV star named Ronald Reagan that PC came into its own as a fully fledged thought-terminating cliche. Over the ensuing years, Republican sloganeers would label anything and everything they wanted conservatives to unquestioningly despise as political correctness, enforced by the PC police to usher in PC culture. Don't like people using slurs? You're PC. Want gay people to have rights? That's PC. Not a fan of unjust wars in Iraq and Afghanistan? You're PC and you hate the troops. Support the troops is another thought-terminating cliche pioneered by the Republican Party to dismiss and attack any and all critique of military imperialism by the USA. Variations of support the troops include, why do you hate the troops? Why do you hate freedom? And, if you hate freedom so much, why don't you move to North Korea? As a thought-terminating cliche, political correctness had a long and illustrious career spanning nearly 40 years, from the early 1980s well into the 2010s. But when Donald Trump's MAGA movement rebranded the party, it was clear that the time had come for a rhetorical refresh. So political correctness was largely retired in favor of a new term that had the added benefit of having racist undertones. This term, of course, was woke, the most successful cliche in thought-terminating history. Woke carries with it all the benefits of political correctness, with enhanced features like being a single snappy syllable and being easily modified into any part of speech. Woke is a crowning achievement that is sure to go down in history as one of the most successful applications of cult language in human history. So if you're looking to build a conservative political cult of your own, make sure you don't sleep on woke. Example 4. Democrats. The Democratic National Convention currently stands as a fractured political cult which lacks much in the way of consolidated charismatic leadership at this time. After a long run of successful application of the cult doctrine of neoliberalism, the Democrats are now looking for a new direction. But while they scramble about for a new identity, they still need to serve the important political economic role of miring the working class in false consciousness so that nobody gets any ideas about questioning capitalism. Obviously, this necessitates the development of various thought-terminating cliches which can be summoned to halt any stray thoughts which might so happen to challenge, confront, or threaten capitalism. For a brief period, liberals toyed with appropriating the word tanky from the much farther left. Whereas tanky was originally used by some factions of communists to attack other factions of communists, liberals began applying the sobriquet to anyone who dared to question cultish calls to vote blue no matter who. Unfortunately, the overuse of this thought-terminating insult by obnoxious debate bros quickly consumed what little rhetorical capital the epithet might have had. By now, tanky is used only by the most terminally online of Reddit radlibs as a harmless invective which literally no one takes seriously. The failure of tanky follows the collapse of older red-baiting words of abuse. Bernie Sanders declawed the word socialist as far back as 2015, and today many young people aren't even bothered by being labeled as communists. And now the DNC is falling even deeper into crisis as superficially progressive liberals like Zoran Mamdani and Graham Plattner have joined forces with Demsocks like Bernie Sanders and AOC to tickle the fancies of the TikTok generation. Of course, these politicians do not meaningfully pose a real challenge to capitalism, but the popularity they've received from the generous use of leftist buzzwords like oligarchy and universal healthcare do signify a concerning normalization of socialist-ish ideas among younger workers, making it more urgent than ever for the DNC powers that be to nip the problem in the bud before it grows out of hand. In this climate of steady normalization of the critique of capitalism, what are liberals to do? How can the DNC keep itself on life support as a cult as it struggles to secure a new cult doctrine? Clearly, there's a need for a thought-terminating cliche that can abruptly frustrate any would-be challengers to the liberal status quo. Fortunately, celebrants of the DNC cult have been hard at work concocting a new sophistic strategy, and all this effort has finally paid off. Liberal thought leaders have recently discovered a new thought-terminating cliche that can be mustered into action whenever class consciousness begins to rear its ugly head. And that cliche is purity testing. Yes, the liberals have discovered the concept of purity testing, and it is proving to be an important weapon in the rhetorical battlegrounds of social media. Purity testing has been used on the internet going back at least to the early 2000s to describe often unreasonably demanding standards of speech, thought, and behavior in political spaces. Rising from the relative obscurity of online questionnaires, which were popular in the mid-2000s, accusations of purity testing first became a thought-terminating cliche in far-left spaces, with various factions using the phrase to attack internal enemies during the great leftist infighting flame wars of the mid to late 2010s. When anarchists, communists, and other far-leftist leveled accusations of purity testing against each other, it was usually over relatively obscure theoretical disagreements, which would be incomprehensible to most outsiders. For example, one might have heard, "We need to stop purity testing over strict adherence to the three worlds theory." Or, "Your insistence that we all accept the notion that social aspects of hierarchical domination are a primary contradiction constitutes petty bourgeois moralist purity testing." In short, throughout the 2010s, the thought-terminating cliché of purity testing was used primarily by factions of online leftists to terminate the thoughts of other factions of online leftists in quibbles over how best to build their specific faction. Communists would accuse their fellow communists of purity testing to gatekeep communism. Anarchists would accuse their fellow anarchists of purity testing to gatekeep anarchism, and so on. In appropriating the language of purity testing, liberals have fundamentally altered the meaning and application of the cliché by using it to terminate thoughts which challenge bourgeois liberalism or confront the ruling class as a class enemy to the workers. Today's communists, anarchists, and socialists are being hoisted on their own oratorical petards, as liberal thought leaders and reply guys have begun accusing anyone who dares to critique a liberal politician or the capitalist political economy as engaging in purity testing. Did a YouTuber point out the inherent contradictions and limitations of exclusively relying on a capitalist-controlled political party to liberate the working class? Accuse them of purity testing. Did someone on Reddit say they're not a fan of Graham Plattner saying he joined the army because he wanted to have an adventure and kill some people? Accuse them of purity testing. Are communists pointing out the simple fact that Bernie Sanders has stated plainly and openly that he does not want to end capitalism and that he thinks capitalism is a great way of running an economy?
Capitalism does a lot of things that are well, that they do it well. It creates wealth, it sparks the entrepreneurial spirit, and that's great.
Accuse them of purity testing. The great thing about this development in thought-terminating cliché technology is that it implies that liberals and communists have the same goals, and that we should have the same standards when it comes to our values and intentions and how we develop our movements. And it only works in one direction. Whenever communists engage in communism, liberals can accuse them of purity testing. However, communists can't accuse liberals of purity testing because liberals don't really have any values or standards that can be tested. While purity testing doesn't have the universal handiness of woke, it meets the needs of liberalism in its current form, and it helps to accomplish the current mission of the DNC cult, which is keeping class consciousness from spreading as the American empire crumbles into chaotic fascism and the false promises of capitalism are laid bare before the eyes of the international proletariat. Accusing workers of purity testing leverages fears of fascism while preventing workers from taking measures that would actually confront fascism. Accusing people who aren't even Democrats of purity testing in this manner is a fast and easy way for liberals to terminate thoughts that might lead workers towards class struggle, and that's what the cult of liberalism is all about. Practice at home. Now that we've explored the ways in which various cult leaders have used thought-terminating cliches to stamp out dissent and cement their authority over the minds of their impressionable followers, it's your turn. Can you think of cliches to terminate the following thoughts? Write your answers below. Exercise 1, at the Self-Improvement Workshop. I don't understand. If money doesn't solve any of life's problems, then why do you charge so much for these courses? What cliche would you use to terminate this thought? Exercise 2, on the compound. Worshipful Father, yesterday you said that all souls live forever in your love. But today you said that only souls which have proven their faith will be spared in the great reckoning that's to come. How can both be true at once? What cliche would you use to terminate this thought? Exercise 3, in the YouTube comments. Hey everyone, the only real solution to the problems caused by capitalism is to build up workers' institutions that can engage in class struggle. If you want to learn more about how we can engage in social revolution by developing class consciousness among workers and building social institutions like workers' parties, you should check out our translations of Vietnam's curriculum on dialectical materialism and historical materialism. The ebooks are available for free at banyanhouse.org/shop. And right now, we're working on a revolutionary guidebook which features never-before-translated works by Ho Chi Minh. You can support this work and find out more at banyanhouse.org/revolutionary-guide. What cliche would you use to terminate this thought? Congratulations on completing Lesson 1, Thought-Terminating Cliches. If you would like to provide feedback about problems you have with this lesson, well, just trust the process. Think about the bigger picture. And remember, you're not ready for that level of thinking.